Mike's Daily Podcast.
Episode 1430, and Mike Matthews, broadcasting from Cafe Anyway, located somewhere in Podcastro Valley, the last place on earth. I'm Mike Matthews, bringing you daily content. And this is my little friend, Content. Are you content, Content? No? What? What's wrong? Are you angry?
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Today we get to Chely Shoehart, Floyd the Floorman, John Deere the engineer.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
And news random. There's lots of news going on today, because it's news random. And I went someplace, and I think that some would say this place will be closed not very long. It's called Fry's Electronics, and oh my god, it is not doing good.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
I had a gift card for Fry's that I got like 2 years ago for $10, and
Mike's
I went in finally
Daily
to use it. Do you know what
Podcast.
Do you know what I used it on? I bought a smoothie. That's right. I bought a smoothie. Say what? And it was because they got a little cafeteria in there with the most depressing people. They're depressed, I mean, because they're sitting in there and nobody's coming into Fry's anymore. And it's huge in there. And there's all these people working who look locked in. It's like, imagine like a Best Buy, only there's like no young, happy people dressed in blue running around. They're just sad, depressed people. I walked up to one guy, I go, do they have Wi-Fi in here? And the guy looked at me like, no. And that's what he said. He said like, no. And then he also said, none of us know what the Wi-Fi password is. And I got the feeling that he didn't want me to go on the Wi-Fi. Look who else walked in. And so that Fry's, the interesting thing of Fry's was that they modeled each store after some interesting theme, like a Mayan temple. I know, scary, right? Human sacrifice. Or, you know, they had each one themed differently. This one was themed after Tesla, not the awesome band from Sacramento from the early 90s. No, the electricity guy with the mustache, played by David Bowie in The Prestige. I think it was. And David Bowie.
And here's today's podcast picture.
I don't know if he would ever go into a Fry's now. I mean, if he was still with us, because Fry's just is. The prices are still out of sight at Fry's. I don't know what the discount is in Fry's. And so it had this feeling, a vague feeling as you walk through, since it is the theme Tesla, that you're at some old World's Fair of some kind. That's what they're trying to go after in Fremont. By the way, the podcast picture is not at Fremont, but somewhere else in the Bay Area. This taken from the East Bay, from Bay Farm Island, near Alameda, looking out toward San Francisco. There was a beautiful sunset, and this was on Saturday night. I got to take the dog, known as Basil the Boxer, out there, and that is the photo that I took on Saturday. But nobody there at the Fry's, and the people there just miserable. And I got the feeling walking around in there that was probably my last time. It's probably going to be closed up soon and just become an online presence. You mark my words, listener. And then I went to a Walmart because I had to get some auto supplies. And I found that Walmart is pretty cheap with the auto supplies. And the one in Pleasanton that I went to, full of people. And I thought to myself, wow. Because Walmart's trying to have this big internet presence. And who were they recently bought by? Or is Google doing something through Walmart? I forget now. There's something I vaguely heard last week. But yeah, so they're interesting. And like young, beautiful people there going to Walmart. So there's a lot. That means some young blood is coming into there. And I sound like a vampire. Perhaps a vampire that likes to count.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 is just a great number. But 1 is the loneliest number that you've ever heard. Hey, a quick shout out. Since I was speaking about the late, great David Bowie, I'm sure he was at one point on Bob Coburn's show. Bob had a great show called Rockline, where he would talk to rock stars and rock bands. He spoke to Rush several times. And awesome interviews with Rush, because Rush really wasn't doing any press when they... And then Bob would interview them, and you'd go, wow, these guys are funny. They're interesting. And, of course, Bob would play their music, and you'd be hearing brand new stuff from the band. It was always brand new stuff. You'd be like, ooh, wow, this is a cool new David Bowie song, or whatever. I remember hearing, and I'll never forget, Midge Ure was on, and Midge Ure was in the band called Ultravox, and he also wrote the song, Feed the World. Do they know it's Christmas time at all? Yeah, Bob Geldof didn't write that. It was written by Midge Ure, and he was on the show. I had no idea who he was even at the time. This was in 1990, and I was busy typing away on a computer. But since people didn't really own computers unless you were stinking rich, you got to use them in the free computer lab at UCSB. And back then, all you could do was type and then print it out. You couldn't save it to anything. It was ridiculous. So I'm printing and looking at the horrible green type face and typing away. And I remember listening to on my Walkman to the local rock station, K-Tide, and they were one of the stations that carried the syndicated show, Bob Coburn's Rockline, and heard the interview with Midge Ure, and they played some of Midge's new album at the time, and I thought, this stuff is awesome. I went out and got that album. So Bob Coburn had an effect on me. Neil Schon was also on that exact same show. Neil Schon, the guitarist from Journey, and he was trying to have a solo career doing like instrumental rock albums. And it sounded cool too, but I didn't rush out and buy that. I think that was a good idea. So, good old Fry's is on its way out. Best Buy, I heard something in the news yesterday about them. I think they're doing okay. But yeah, that's the big story of constantly hearing in the world of business, is what places are going to get phased out because of Amazon. But a couple people walked in.
Hello, Mike Matthews. It's Chely Shoehart, gift shop supervisor. That was very interesting about Fry's.
Thank you. Mike, this is Floyd the Floorman! And this is John Deere, the engineer. Yes, Mike, I've gone into Fry's a couple of times. I once bought a printer. Yeah, printers. I know people that, like, buy printers just to get the ink, because it's cheaper to buy the printer along with the ink than to buy the actual ink. Some crazy deals that I've heard about people getting. Okay, we're going to get to this segment called News Random. MIKEs-DAILY-PODCAST.com, the wonderful website where you can hear all the past shows and see past podcast pictures. All at MIKEs-DAILY-PODCAST.com, and the Amazon link there if you want to help us out that way and get a special... Oh, well, you'll be shopping on Amazon. I guess I'm already pointing out how Amazon's taking over the world. It's taken over my podcast. But you can buy stuff on that Amazon link, and it helps out the show. There's also the PayPal. If you'd like to help us out that way, you'll get a special greeting from all the Cafe Anyway characters. And now, the segment called...
News Random.
I don't know what that's for.
Alphabet's Google, speaking of Google, yesterday unveiled tools to make augmented reality apps for mobile devices using the Android operating system. So it's trying to do a showdown with Apple and their iPhone over the next generation of smartphone features, augmented reality, AR, phone-based, in which digital objects are superimposed onto the real world on screen. Got a huge boost from the popularity of the Pokemon Go game. Remember last year, everybody was talking about that. Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Pikachu!
The game launched in the United States in July of last year, over a year ago, sent players into streets, offices, parks, and restaurants to search for colorful animated characters. Analysts expect the game to make $3 billion for Apple over 2 years as gamers buy Pokecoins from the App Store. Google's take on the technology will first be available on the Samsung Galaxy S8 and Google's own Pixel phone. The company said in a blog post that it hoped to make the system called R-Core, available to at least 100 million users, but did not set a date for the broad release. Apple in June announced a similar system called AR-Kit, that it plans to release this fall on hundreds of millions of devices. But let's talk about Harvey. The devastating path of Harvey made landfall today for a second time since its roared ashore last week as the biggest rainstorm in the history of the continental United States finally began to move away from Houston and carried its fury to Louisiana. All too familiar with this sort of thing. Now a tropical storm, Harvey's immediate effects are not expected to be as devastating as a Category 4 hurricane that first blasted Houston and other parts of Texas beginning last Friday, but it still packed potentially deadly and disastrous torrents of rain that have left Texas with a punishing toll. At least 22 people known dead and possibly more. Tens of thousands left homeless and storm-ravaged areas that could take months or longer to bounce back. Forecasters predict another 5 to 10 inches of rain could fall in western Louisiana, where rivers and bayous are already swollen with near-record downpours. Coastal lowlands also faced a double threat. A storm surge warning for the coast from Holly Beach to Morgan City, Louisiana, said water levels could rise another 2 to 4 feet. To the east, New Orleans was under a flash flood warning. Meanwhile, authorities up the Mississippi Delta, as far away as Tennessee, prepared to feel the brunt of Harvey as it began to chart northward. Louisiana's Governor John Bel Edwards said at a news conference to prepare and pray as Harvey arced again over the Gulf of Mexico to pick up more rainfall potential. The storm made landfall before dawn Wednesday near Cameron, Louisiana, a marshy port about 20 miles east of the Texas border. In Beaumont, Texas, which is 85 miles east of Houston, at least 10 inches of rain fell on Tuesday afternoon alone. 10 inches. Jeez. I remember during all the rain we got in California when we hit 13 inches, and we were like, stop! In a deluge, a mother and child got out of their car on a flooded freeway service and they were swept away. The child clung to her mother for a half a mile. Police and firefighters got to them just before they went under a trestle and were lost for good. Only the child survived. This is a terrible thing. I really didn't know how bad in this situation. Well, you really have to stay away from storm water. You don't know how fast it's moving. You don't know what's in the water. There could be snakes. There could be rusted nails. Trying to walk around in water, you don't know if you're going to... I heard one lady say they had to walk in waist-high water, and they were like bumping into fire hydrants and stepping off of curbs. They were afraid of falling into a manhole cover, a open manhole, and, there's all kinds of treacheries beneath the surface. So, and after more than 50 inches of rain over 4 days, Houston was less of a city and more of an archipelago, a chain of urbanized islands in a muddy brown sea. All around it, flat-bottomed boats and helicopters still plucking victims from rooftops. And water was still pouring in from overfilled reservoirs and swollen rivers. This according to the Washington Post. They seem to have almost every picture or video of flooded neighborhoods in and around Houston. There are scores of cars and trucks with water up to their roofs, in some cases over the hood and roof. In fact, the flooding is so extensive, Cox Automotive estimates 500,000 vehicles may wind up in the scrapyard. 500,000 vehicles. They also talk about be careful in the upcoming months as people try to resell these cars, and they're just not a car you want, because it's going to just have all kinds of issues. Once a car's been flooded, it is just... Those shopping for a used car may be surprised as the prices they see. Used car values are already close to record high. prices could climb even higher over the next couple of weeks due to the tighter supply. Meanwhile, not all the flooded vehicles will wind up in the salvage yard. Many will be cleaned up and resold, often without the new buyer realizing they are buying a salvaged car or truck. This according to CNBC. The resale of repaired flooded cars is not illegal as long as the flood damage is disclosed on the title to the buyer. After Katrina, thousands of rebuilt flood vehicles were sold to unsuspecting buyers with titles that have been washed or reissued in a different state. Hurricane Katrina, public awareness of the problem is greater after that, but with thousands of flooded vehicles, it's hard to prevent this from happening, said an expert in the situation. And finally, this, not a good piece of news. North Korea's launch of a missile over Japan was a prelude to more military operations directed at the American territory of Guam, said North Korea. The country's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Kim Jong-un presided over the dawn launch Tuesday of the ultra-modern rocket system, the first missile ever fired from the capital Pyongyang. The intermediate-range missile, identified by North Koreans as the Hwasong-12, flew over Japan, further fueling tensions between North Korea and the United States and its allies Japan and South Korea. Early Wednesday, the U.S. conducted a test intercept of a medium-range ballistic missile off the coast of Hawaii. U.S. officials told CNN the test was planned for a long time before North Korea's launch. The North Korean launch was the first step of the military operation of the North Korean military in the Pacific and a meaningful prelude to containing Guam, said their state media. Guam's governor's office said in a statement there is no change in the island's threat level. As we go outside a cafe anyway, we bring you Mike's Daily Podcast somewhere in Podcaster Valley. Guam's Homeland Security Advisor said, "We knew, based on North Korea events in previous years, that with the joint exercise between the U.S. and South Korea and its allies, we can expect rhetoric and activity in North Korea." That's going on in the world today, so just to help bring you up to date. On a positive note, I think I'm smarter. On a positive note, even though I've been single now for, nigh on 5 years, I think I'm smarter because I was listening to a tape of me, and disasters happen, and 5 years ago the disaster was a bunch of tornadoes that hit Alabama, and I have a house in Alabama, and my then wife and I, we were visiting friends in Alabama, and we were driving through Alabama looking at some of the destruction, none to my house thankfully, but some of the destruction not too far away from my house. And I filmed the whole thing. Well, I watched the video just a few days ago, and I listened to me talking, and I was like, what the? I think I was stupid back then, and I'll tell you why. I think what happens when you're married is sometimes both of your brains absorb all the knowledge around you, and so like one partner absorbs some of the information that maybe you can't handle, and you end up relying on each other in that way. I could be completely wrong, and maybe that's why we're not married anymore. It was dysfunctional in that way, but if it works for you, I don't see any problem with it. It didn't work for us. In fact, as I was looking through the pictures from that trip, I could see that clearly my then wife was not having a good time on that trip, but whatever. That was long ago, and cafe whatever. I mean, cafe anyway.
Anyway,
that's it for the show. Next show, it's going to be Benita, the Disgruntled Fiddle Player, and the Brewmaster. Have a great day. Hopefully things look up.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at MIKEs-DAILY-PODCAST.com. Email Mike now at MIKEs-DAILY-PODCAST@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye!